Tiny black twins beg Mafia boss for help. He instantly bursts into tears. That's how this night begins. 2 small voices in the rain, a feared king of the city, and tears he swore he'd never shed. The kids beg. Their guardian steps between danger and the door. The Mafia boss says, "Stay behind me!" Then a red sniper dot crawls across a tiny chest, and the world explodes. He locks them in a fortress. Rules are drawn. Secrets press in. Someone inside is a traitor. A crooked cop wants the kids for protective custody. But why did the monster cry? What did he lose that makes their voices break him? As dawn hits steel windows, heat sparks between protector and guardian. Just as a message arrives, "We have a friend inside your house. Now the trap is set, the city is watching, and the clock is ticking. Will the most dangerous man alive burn his empire to keep them safe, or lose them because he waited 1 second too long?" Rainwater dripped from Conrad's suit as he guided them down the stairwell, his large frame blocking any line of sight to the children. The fire alarm's piercing wail echoed off concrete walls, but Theo's whimpers still cut through. Jamal clutched his brother's hand, their sneakers squeaking on wet steps. Renee's pulse hammered. Her nursing instincts screamed to check the boys for shock, but Conrad's iron grip on her wrist kept them moving. "How do I know we can trust you?" she demanded, having to raise her voice over the alarm. "Because I'm not the one shooting at children," Conrad answered without looking back. His voice carried both ice and certainty. "My men have the building's perimeter. The garage connects to a secure route." A door banged somewhere above them. Conrad instantly pushed them against the wall, his body forming a shield. Renee pulled the twins close, feeling their rapid heartbeats. After 3 tense breaths, heavy footsteps revealed 2 of Conrad's men descending. "Sir, sniper's position's empty. They're mobile." Conrad's jaw clenched. "Lock down the block. No one leaves without my approval." He pressed a hand to his earpiece, issuing rapid commands in what sounded like Russian. They reached the ground floor, where emergency lights cast everything in dim red. Jamal tugged at Conrad's sleeve. "The photo! I dropped it upstairs!" "I'll get you a new copy," Conrad said, surprisingly gentle. "Your safety matters more than paper." Theo sniffled. "But it's the last one of Mom." Something flickered across Conrad's face. Pain, recognition. He crouched to the boy's level, his movement smooth despite the urgency. "I understand. When my brother died, I kept his things close too. But right now we need to move." Renee noticed how the twins responded to his tone, the way he acknowledged their loss instead of dismissing it. It didn't fit her image of the brutal crime lord from news headlines. The garage door required multiple security codes. Inside, 3 identical black SUVs idled, their engines alow, rumble that vibrated through the concrete floor. Conrad directed them to the middle vehicle, his men forming a protective circle. "Both boys in the center," he ordered, helping them climb in. "Renee, you're between them and the door." He slid into the front passenger seat, barking coordinates into his phone. Renee buckled the twins in, her hands steadier than she felt. "Where are we going?" "My compound outside the city. It's the only place I can guarantee their safety while we figure out who's hunting them." Conrad turned, his gray eyes intense. "That detective who tried to take them. Name?" "Marcus Chen," Jamal answered before Renee could stop him. "He showed us a badge, but it looked different than the other police ones." Conrad's expression darkened. "Because he's internal affairs, not regular police. The corruption investigator has become corrupted." He tapped his phone, bringing up surveillance footage of the shelter's entrance. The sniper's position, timing of the shot, this was coordinated. Someone knew you'd be here tonight. Rain drummed on the roof as they pulled out. 2 other SUVs falling into formation. Renee watched the shelter shrink in the side mirror, her world tilting on its axis. Yesterday she'd been an ER nurse, worried about school lunches and homework. Now she was in a mob boss's vehicle, running from dirty cops and professional killers. Theo pressed against her side, his small hand finding hers. "Are we going to be okay?" She squeezed back, meeting Conrad's eyes in the rearview mirror. The hardness there couldn't quite hide something else. Understanding, protectiveness, maybe even pain. He gave a slight nod. "Yes, baby," she said, pulling both boys close. "We're going to be okay." Jamal fidgeted with his seatbelt. "Mr. Conrad, why did you help us? Most grown-ups just tell us to talk to police." The question seemed to catch Conrad off guard. His shoulders tensed, then deliberately relaxed. "Because I was 7 when I lost my brother. Foster care, bad people who should have protected us." His voice roughened. No child should face that alone. They wound through back streets, Conrad's driver taking an erratic route to shake any tail. Rain blurred the windows, turning streetlights into smears of color. Both boys gradually slumped against Renee, exhaustion winning over fear. My sister made me promise to keep them safe, Renee said quietly. Their mother, my best friend since kindergarten. She didn't deserve what happened. Few victims do. Conrad's tone was neutral, but his knuckles whitened on his phone. The problem is figuring out why she was targeted. Why someone's still hunting her children. She was a court stenographer, Renee offered. Worked mainly corporate cases, nothing obviously dangerous. Corporate cases mean money. Money means corruption. Conrad studied the sleeping twins. And corruption, especially in law enforcement, is my specialty. Not for the usual reasons people think. Why then? He was silent. So long she thought he wouldn't answer. Because sometimes the only way to protect innocence is with calculated violence, to be the monster that hunts other monsters. The convoy turned onto a private road, trees pressing close on both sides. Ahead, floodlights illuminated high walls topped with security cameras. Armed guards manned the gate, faces expressionless as they waved them through. Renee held the boys tighter as they approached a sprawling mansion. She was entering the lion's den, putting their lives in the hands of a dangerous man. But watching Conrad scan for threats, seeing how carefully he'd shielded Theo from the sniper, she wondered if perhaps they'd found the exact right kind of monster. Steel elevator doors opened to the 47th floor. Conrad ushered them into a penthouse that looked more like a command center than a home. Banks of monitors lined one wall, their blue glow casting shadows across marble floors. Security feeds, he explained, gesturing to the screens showing every angle of the building's exterior. No one moves without us seeing them. Renee guided the sleepy twins forward, taking in the fortress-like space. Floor-to-ceiling windows were clearly bulletproof, and what looked like decorative metal panels probably concealed enough firepower to start a small war. Your rules, she asked, noting how his men stayed in the hallway until he nodded permission. Simple. You make all decisions regarding the boys. My team answers to you for their safety. His gray eyes held hers. And you never lie to me. Even small lies break trust we can't afford to lose. She matched his intensity. Agreed. But I need the same honesty from you. A slight smile touched his lips. Fair enough. The living room opened to a kitchen of gleaming steel and black granite. 3 bedroom doors stood open, 2 smaller rooms clearly prepared for children, with twin beds and nightlights, and a larger suite she assumed was hers. Medical supplies? Renee asked, noticing the blood on his sleeve where glass had caught him during the sniper attack. He retrieved a comprehensive trauma kit. She made him sit while she cleaned the shallow cut on his forearm, her nurse's training taking over. His muscles were rigid under her touch, but he submitted to the examination without complaint. A small movement caught her attention. Jamal had wandered closer, drawn to the silver rosary hanging from Conrad's pocket. The boy's fingers reached out to touch the delicate metalwork. Conrad went absolutely still. His hands, steady through gunfire and crisis, began to shake. My brother had one just like it, he said quietly, voice rough. We got them at our first communion before the fire. Understanding dawned in Renee's eyes. The lost twin he'd mentioned. No wonder seeing Jamal and Theo had hit him so hard. Can I see? Jamal asked. Conrad carefully lifted the chain, letting the rosary pool in his palm. The beads are mother of pearl. The cross is silver from an old Spanish church. While Jamal studied the religious artifact, Renee finished bandaging Conrad's arm. She could feel tension thrumming through him, grief and protectiveness warring in his expression as he watched the child. Tour, she suggested gently, giving him space to collect himself. He nodded, leading them through the penthouse. The boys' rooms were mirror images with built-in shelves and desks. Her suite had a private bathroom and a view that would be stunning once the sun rose. The living area featured deep couches and a kitchen island perfect for homework or meals. Blackout shades are bulletproof, Conrad explained, demonstrating the controls. Each room has a panic button that alerts security. Elevator needs codes changed daily. His phone buzzed. He stepped away to read messages, brow furrowing. Spire's got initial intel. Spire? My information specialist. He tapped the screen. They've confirmed a cartel connection. The twins are being viewed as potential leverage. Renee's stomach clenched. Against who? Still determining that? But there's more. A gang unit detective accessed your case file at 2:11 a.m. No warrant, no official request. Which means they're either investigating or involved, Renee concluded. Exactly. He moved to the wall of monitors, studying elevator feeds. We need to assume corruption at multiple levels. Dawn was breaking over the city, painting the sky in watercolor shades of pink and gold. A delivery cart rolled out of the service elevator, breakfast arriving with military precision. The twins perked up at the smell of pancakes and bacon. Eat, Conrad told them. You'll need your strength. While the boys dug in, Renee watched him patrol the perimeter. He checked locks, tested panic buttons, scanned security feeds with obsessive attention. The powerful crime lord had transformed into something closer to a protective older brother. You should eat too, she said. He shook his head, eyes locked on the monitors. Later. Jamal carefully cut his pancakes into precise triangles. Are the bad guys gonna find us here? No, Conrad answered immediately. This place is secure. I designed it myself. Is that why there are cameras everywhere? Theo asked between bites. Yes. Nothing moves without us seeing it. The first direct sunlight streamed through the windows, making the boys squint. Renee started to rise, intending to adjust the shades, when a soft chime cut through the morning quiet. Conrad's phone lit up with an encrypted message. His face went blank as he read the words. We have a friend inside your house. The starkness of his expression made Renee's blood run cold. She pulled the twins closer, suddenly aware of how many people had access to this supposed sanctuary. Guards, staff, delivery personnel. Conrad's fingers flew across his phone, likely messaging Spire for immediate background checks. His other hand settled on his weapon, a subtle reminder that while this might look like a luxury penthouse, it was still a fortress under siege. The pancakes grew cold as silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft hum of surveillance equipment and the distant sound of traffic far below. Someone had breached their defenses before they'd even settled in. The question was who, and how close they already were to the children Conrad had sworn to protect. Sunlight streamed through the bulletproof windows as Renee paced the living room, already dressed in her hospital scrubs. I have a shift starting at 9. My patients need me. Conrad spread a detailed city map across the kitchen island, his finger tracing red lines that formed an ominous web around their building. Every exit is compromised. The cartel has patrol units here, here, and here. He tapped 3 intersections. They're working with corrupt officers to draft a protective pickup order for the boys. That's not legal, Renee protested. I have full guardianship. Legality won't matter once they have the twins in custody. His voice softened. If you walk through those doors with them, they'll be taken. Jamal and Theo sat on the couch, cartoons playing quietly as they picked at their breakfast. Renee watched them, her heart aching. She couldn't risk their safety, but they needed structure, education, therapy. Okay, she turned back to Conrad. Let's negotiate. They need schooling. Already arranged homeschool packets? They'll be delivered by trusted courier. They need counseling, what they've been through. I know a child therapist who works with trauma victims. She'll do secure video sessions from neutral ground. Renee nodded slowly. And the weapons. I understand they're necessary, but will be concealed around the children, he finished. My men know the rules. Agreed. She met his gaze. But I have conditions too. No more surprises. The boys need routine, stability. One condition in return. Conrad leaned forward. Complete honesty about any past connections that could put them at risk. Ex-boyfriends, old cases, anyone who might have reason to track you down. She thought of Detective Marcus, his possessive behavior after their breakup. Agreed. Conrad moved to a painting above the couch, showing her how it concealed a silent alarm. Press here and here. Security responds in under 2 minutes. He led her to a heavy door disguised as a pantry. Panic room. Code is 7392. Reinforced steel, separate ventilation, month of supplies. When they checked on the twins, Jamal was clutching his pillow. I don't want to sleep alone, he whispered. Without hesitation, Conrad ordered a cot brought in. We'll take turns, he told Renee. One of us visible at all times. They spent the next hours creating schedules. Study time at 10 when minds were fresh. Quiet rest after lunch. Cartoons at 4 as a reward for completed lessons. Conrad's men rotated elevator duty silently, professional shadows keeping watch. Theo arranged his stuffed animals with military precision, while Jamal drew elaborate mazes in his notebook. Renee noticed how he kept touching the rosary Conrad had let him examine earlier. "Can I keep it safe for you?" Jamal asked suddenly. "Just during the day?" Something flickered in Conrad's eyes. Pain, memory, resolution. He carefully draped the silver chain around the boy's neck. "Return it each night, deal." Jamal beamed, fingers already tracing the familiar patterns of the beads. By early afternoon, they'd settled into an uneasy rhythm. Renee sat cross-legged on the floor, reading aloud from a chapter book while the twins built a blanket fort around her. The story's familiar words helped mask the tension humming through the penthouse. Conrad's phone buzzed. He moved to his office nook but left the door open, maintaining line of sight to the living room. Renee caught fragments of his conversation. "How close?" "Verify the source. No one else knows." She watched him pace, one hand raking through his dark hair. The call was about their mysterious friend inside, and from his expression, they'd confirmed a mole in his organization. The twins remained absorbed in their fort building, oblivious to the undercurrents of danger. Renee kept reading, her voice steady, even as she cataloged escape routes and memorized security protocols. The panic room code echoed in her mind. 7392, 4 digits between safety and catastrophe. Outside, the city continued its normal rhythm. Traffic flowed, clouds drifted past gleaming windows, pedestrians hurried along sidewalks far below. But up here in their fortified sanctuary, time seemed to move differently. Each moment stretched with the weight of waiting, for answers, for danger, for whatever storm was gathering around them. Conrad ended his call but remained in the office, scribbling notes with sharp, angry strokes. The mole's existence explained how their enemies had found the twins at the shelter, how they'd known exactly where to position their sniper. Someone close to Conrad was feeding information to their opponents. Renee turned another page, keeping her voice calm, as she read about magical wardrobes and talking animals. The boys needed this illusion of normalcy, this pocket of peace before whatever came next. She caught Conrad watching them, his expression softening as Jamal carefully arranged the rosary beads across his small chest. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the floor, and somewhere in the city, a traitor was sharing their secrets. But in this moment, surrounded by blankets and children's laughter, Renee chose to focus on the story in her hands. They would face tomorrow's dangers when they came. For now, they had created their own fortress, not of steel and surveillance, but of shared meals and bedtime stories, of promises kept and trust carefully built. The afternoon sun slanted through the penthouse windows as Conrad moved into the kitchen. His shoulders, so rigid during the phone call, loosened as he pulled eggs and cheese from the refrigerator. Renee watched, puzzled, as those deadly hands competently cracked eggs into a bowl. "Who's hungry?" he asked, his voice pitched gentle for the twins. "Me." Theo scrambled up from their blanket fort. Jamal followed, the rosary swinging against his chest. Conrad whisked the eggs with one hand while the other typed rapid-fire messages on his phone. The contradiction was striking, domestic chef and commanding officer in one fluid motion. He heated the pan, added butter, and continued coordinating his operation without missing a beat. "Want to see something?" He pulled a silver dollar from his pocket. The boys crowded closer as he made the coin dance across his knuckles, disappearing and reappearing behind their ears. Their delighted giggles filled the kitchen. Renee noticed how he adjusted his movements, making himself smaller, less intimidating. His voice stayed soft, his gestures measured. This man who commanded an empire was carefully crafting himself into someone children could trust. The omelets came out perfect, steam rising from perfectly folded yellow crescents. Conrad plated them with the same precision he'd shown checking security feeds earlier. "Magic trick number 2, he said, producing chocolate chips from nowhere and sprinkling them on top." The boy's eyes lit up. His phone buzzed. The message from Spire was encrypted but clear, the suspicious text traced to a burner phone. More critically, whoever sent it had used a meeting source code, information restricted to Conrad's inner circle of lieutenants. Renee watched the twins eat, their earlier fear momentarily forgotten in the simple pleasure of warm food. The weight of her own secrets pressed against her chest. Better to offer truth now than have it discovered later. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly when the boys were occupied with their plates. "About my past." Conrad's attention focused on her with laser intensity. He waited, giving her space to find the words. "There's a detective, Aaron Caldwell. We dated last year. When I ended it, he didn't take it well." She pressed her hands flat against the counter. "He started showing up at my workplace, my apartment, called at all hours. Then he wanted me to be his informant, feed him information about patients who might be connected to organized crime." Conrad's expression didn't change, but the temperature around him seemed to drop 10 degrees. When I refused, he threatened to challenge my guardianship of the boys, said he could make a case that my work schedule made me an unfit guardian. Her voice stayed steady through long practice. He has friends in family court. How long? Conrad's question came out clipped. Since last spring, I filed complaints, but nothing stuck. He's careful. Conrad's fingers flew across his phone, dispatching orders. Within minutes, surveillance teams were repositioning to monitor Caldwell's off-duty movements. The boys finished their omelets and retreated to their fort, leaving dirty plates behind. Renee started to clean up, but Conrad waved her off. He loaded the dishwasher himself, movements efficient despite his attention being clearly elsewhere. Sunset painted the city orange and purple when one of the security feeds lit up. The footage showed a parking garage dimly lit. Detective Aaron Caldwell, still in his department-issue suit, stood talking with another man. "Bishop," Conrad said, voice flat. "My lieutenant for the past 8 years." They watched the men shake hands, exchange what looked like documents. The betrayal was clear in every line of Conrad's body, though his expression remained carefully neutral. "Boys," he called, voice showing none of his tension. "Time to clean up the fort before dinner." The twins groaned but started gathering blankets. Jamal carefully removed the rosary, bringing it back to Conrad with solemn ceremony. The exchange felt like a ritual, grounding them all in the simple reality of everyday routines while deeper currents swirled beneath. Evening settled over the city like a velvet curtain. Lights twinkled on in surrounding buildings, creating the illusion of stars. Inside their fortified bubble, Renee helped the twins organize their fort supplies while Conrad monitored more security feeds. "We watch," he told her quietly when the boys were out of earshot. "We confirm." His eyes met hers, glacial with controlled fury. "Then we cut the knife out." The evening wrapped around them, domestic and dangerous all at once. Theo lined up his stuffed animals in formation, while Jamal drew elaborate battle plans for tomorrow's fort reconstruction. Conrad's phone buzzed constantly with updates, but he kept his responses contained, protecting the fragile peace they'd built. Renee understood now that they were balanced on a knife's edge. This careful routine they'd created could shatter at any moment. Yet watching Conrad help Theo rescue a teddy bear trapped under the couch, she saw how desperately he was working to preserve this pocket of normalcy for the boys. The city lights reflected off the windows, turning them into mirrors. Their small group was reflected back at them. 2 children building worlds from blankets. A nurse who'd become their guardian, and a dangerous man choosing, moment by moment, to be gentle. Behind them, security feeds tracked betrayal and threat. But here in this space, they'd carved out something almost like peace. The penthouse transformed as night fell. Conrad's team converted the dining area into a tactical center, laptops and communication gear arranged with military precision. The casual domesticity of dinner gave way to the controlled chaos of strategy. Renee sat cross-legged on the couch, helping Theo with his multiplication tables, while Jamal worked on a reading assignment. She kept her voice steady and encouraging, but her attention split between the worksheets and the war room behind them. "Send the false schedule to Bishop's and Martinez only," Conrad instructed, his voice low and measured. "Different versions. We'll see which one leaks." His fingers drummed a quiet rhythm on the table as he studied building schematics. "Making it look like you're heading to the West Side Club at 11, Spire confirmed, their hands flying over multiple keyboards. "With the real move through maintenance." Conrad nodded once. "Full surveillance on both recipients. I want to know every call, every text." Jamal yawned widely, and Theo followed suit moments later. The boys had pushed through their evening routine with admirable focus, but exhaustion was winning. They curled up on opposite ends of the couch, worksheets scattered between them. Conrad noticed immediately. He crossed the room with silent steps and carefully gathered their papers. Then, with movements that seemed at odds with his earlier tactical precision, he took a soft throw blanket and settled it over both boys. His touch was feather-light as he tucked the edges around their shoulders. Renee watched, struck by the tenderness in his expression. This man who commanded an empire with iron control now stood guard over sleeping children with such gentle attention. "They remind me of him," Conrad whispered, his voice barely audible. He perched on the coffee table, keeping watch. "My brother. There are only 2 things that make me cry now: hearing small voices begging for help and dreaming of Nikolai calling from the fire." The confession hung in the air between them, raw and unguarded. Renee reached out instinctively, her fingers brushing his sleeve. He didn't pull away. A quiet alert from Spire's station broke the moment. Movement on Bishop's phone, text forwarded to an unmarked number. Their fingers flew across keys. Tracking, it's Caldwell's burner. Conrad straightened, mask sliding back into place. They watched in tense silence as Spire pulled up phone records in real time. At precisely 9:07 p.m., Caldwell's burner connected to a number tagged in their system as cartel linked. Proof secured, Spire announced with grim satisfaction. Both the forwarded schedule and the call. Begin phase 2, Conrad ordered. His team moved with practiced efficiency, coordinating through hand signals and quick nods. The elaborate dance began. Conrad's personal elevator lit up on the security feeds, descending empty while he slipped into a service car through a hidden panel. Bishop would be watching the main elevator, expecting his boss to follow the leaked schedule. Renee positioned herself strategically in the living room, angling to keep both the sleeping boys and the panic room door in sight. The heavy steel barrier was propped open, ready for a quick retreat if needed. She'd slipped a kitchen knife into easy reach behind a throw pillow. Not that she planned to need it, but the weight of it was reassuring. The security feeds showed the garage level in multiple angles. Dark figures moved through the shadows, taking positions. Near the exit ramp, their weapons glinted dully under the fluorescent lights. Conrad's voice came through the command center's speakers, barely a whisper. Stay with me. We take them clean. Time seemed to stretch like taffy as they watched the garage feeds. Jamal shifted in his sleep, mumbling something about blanket forts. Theo's hand dangled off the couch, fingers twitching in some dream. The contrast between their peaceful rest and the tactical operation unfolding below was surreal. Spire maintained a running commentary in clipped phrases. Target 1 in position, second team confirmed, perimeter sealed. Their fingers never stopped moving across the keyboards, coordinating the complex choreography of surveillance and support. The night pressed against the windows, the city lights creating a glittering backdrop to their vigil. Inside, the penthouse hummed with controlled tension. Renee found herself counting breaths, the deep, steady rhythm of the sleeping twins, her own measured inhales, the focused efficiency of Conrad's team. Security cameras tracked shadows and movement in the garage. Armed figures settled into formation, unaware they were walking into a trap of their own making. The betrayal that had been carefully hidden in daylight meetings and coded messages would now be exposed in the concrete and fluorescent underbelly of the building. Through it all, the twins slept on, cocooned in their blanket. Renee wondered what they dreamed about, hopefully something far removed from the adult complications that had brought them here. Their presence had carved out this strange space where tenderness and tactical planning coexisted, where a dangerous man paused in his war-making to tuck in sleeping children. The digital clock on the wall ticked closer to midnight. Renee's fingers found the knife handle behind the pillow, more for reassurance than intent. The panic room gaped open behind her, a steel-lined promise of safety if needed. But her attention remained fixed on the sleeping boys and the security feeds, showing their protector, moving into position. Minutes stretched out like hours as they waited for the trap to spring. The garage cameras captured every angle of the killing ground that Bishop's betrayal had created. And somewhere in that concrete maze, Conrad waited with the patience of a predator, ready to excise the threat to his newfound charges with surgical precision. The garage erupted into chaos at 12:03 a.m. On the security feed, headlights swept across concrete as tires squealed. The first shots cracked through the night, echoing off the walls. Conrad moved with lethal grace, his body a weapon honed by years of violence. 2 attackers rushed him from behind a column. He caught the first one's wrist, twisted, and the crack of breaking bone mixed with a howl of pain. The second swung wild. Conrad stepped inside the punch, drove his elbow up, and dropped the man with clinical precision. A third attacker raised his weapon, but Conrad was already there, stripping the gun away with practiced efficiency. Box formation, his command cut through the chaos. His men responded instantly, moving like shadows to trap the remaining hostiles between vehicles and columns. Upstairs, Renee's hands trembled as she watched the feed. The sounds of conflict carried through the floor. Muffled shots, shouts, the screech of metal on concrete. She forced her breathing to steady, channeling her ER training. Panic wouldn't help anyone. She touched Jamal's shoulder gently. Hey, sweetie, time to wake up for a minute. The boys stirred, blinking in confusion. Theo rubbed his eyes. What's that noise? Just some fireworks downstairs. Renee kept her voice light, steady. Let's have a little adventure in the special room, okay? She guided them to the panic room, its steel door reassuringly solid. Inside, she settled them onto cushions. Want to play a fun breathing game, like the fish at the aquarium? The boys nodded, still sleepy. She led them through deep belly breaths, making it into a game of ocean waves rising and falling. The concrete walls muffled most of the garage chaos, but when a particularly loud crash came through, she just smiled and said, "Big firework that time!" The service elevator hummed to life at 12:47 a.m. Renee squeezed the boy's hands. "Stay here and keep practicing those fish breaths. I'll be right back." Conrad stepped out, looking like he'd walked through hell in an expensive suit. Blood spattered his white shirt, most of it not his own. His lip was split, already swelling, and his knuckles were raw. But his eyes, when they met hers, were clear and steady. She led him to the guest bathroom without a word. He sat on the edge of the tub while she gathered supplies, moving with the same efficiency she used in the ER. Warm water, antiseptic, gauze. Her hands didn't shake as she cleaned his lip. This was familiar territory, the aftermath of violence, putting people back together. What was different was the way he watched her work, his gaze intense but not threatening. She dabbed antiseptic on his knuckles, noting the precision of the damage. These weren't wild brawler's hands, they were surgical instruments. "The boys?" he asked quietly. "Safe. Playing breathing games in the panic room." He nodded once, accepting her competence. By 2 a.m., the garage had been cleared, evidence removed, and Bishop was secured in a separate facility. The boys were back asleep, cushioned by pillows in their room. Renee sat at the kitchen island, hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea. Conrad stood at the counter, his own cup untouched. "I was 13 when the fire started," he said suddenly, voice flat. "Foster home in Queens. Nikolai was trapped upstairs. I could hear him calling." He stared into his tea. "I tried to go back in. The firefighters had to restrain me." Renee absorbed this, understanding how those screams still echoed in his dreams. "My sister made me promise on her deathbed," she offered quietly. "She said, 'Keep them away from men who use fear.' She'd seen too many kids get caught in those webs. I am one of those men." His words were brutally honest. "You use fear as a weapon," she agreed. "But not against children, not against the innocent." She reached for the honey, and their fingers brushed as he passed it. The touch was brief, electric. They settled on opposite ends of the couch as the night deepened toward 3 a.m. The security monitors cast a blue glow across the room, their hum a technological lullaby. Renee's eyes grew heavy as the adrenaline crash hit. Across the cushions, Conrad's breathing slowly evened out. The city lights twinkled beyond the windows, and the penthouse settled into quiet. Their bodies angled unconsciously toward each other as sleep crept in, guardians at rest but still alert. The night's violence felt distant now, cleaned away like the blood on his knuckles, but its lessons lingered. His capacity for necessary brutality, her strength in chaos, and the strange trust growing between them. The last thing Renee saw before her eyes closed was Conrad's hand resting near his phone, ready even in sleep to respond to any threat. Her own hand lay close to the panic room remote, their positions mirror images of protection. Between them, the space on the couch remained empty, a physical representation of the careful distance they maintained, even as circumstances pushed them closer together. The monitors kept their vigil, as both finally surrendered to exhaustion, their breathing synchronized without conscious thought. Outside, the city moved through its nocturnal rhythms, unaware of the small fortress of safety they'd created in this high-rise haven, where a man of violence and a healer of wounds found common ground in protecting two sleeping boys. Sunlight crept through the blinds as small bodies wriggled onto the couch. Renee blinked awake to find Jamal's elbow in her ribs and Theo sprawled across Conrad's chest. She checked her watch. 7:06 a.m. "Hungry," Jamal announced, poking her side. Conrad was already alert, one hand steadying Theo as he sat up. "Pancakes," he offered, and both boys lit up. In the kitchen, he moved with surprising domesticity, measuring flour and cracking eggs while Renee made calls. The child psychologist's office scheduled a video session for that afternoon, promising a trauma-informed approach. Her phone buzzed with a message from Spire. "Emergency petition filed over 600. Caldwell seeking protective placement. 72-hour hearing window." Renee's hands trembled as she showed Conrad the screen. He studied it while flipping a perfectly golden pancake. "I have people who can backdate documents," he said quietly. "Create a paper trail showing continuous custody arrangements." "No," Renee's voice was firm. "We fight this clean. Forged documents will only prove his point about unsafe guardianship. He's manipulating the system." Then we beat him at his own game, legally. She took over pancake duty while he processed this. I have documentation of his harassment, texts threatening to challenge custody if I didn't inform on you. That's abuse of power. The boys devoured breakfast, oblivious to the tension. Conrad watched them with a softness that made Renee's chest ache. This dangerous man who'd killed in the garage hours ago now carefully cut Theo's pancakes into manageable bites. The day passed in a blur of activity. The telehealth session, homework, endless calls to her lawyer. By nightfall, the twins were exhausted, falling asleep during their bedtime story. Renee found Conrad on the balcony, city lights reflecting in his eyes. The night air carried the weight of their shared confessions from hours before. She stepped closer, drawn by something electric between them. "You're afraid," he said, not looking at her. "Always. For them." She leaned on the railing. "But not of you. Not anymore." He turned then, and the heat in his gaze made her breath catch. The space between them crackled with tension built over days of forced proximity, shared danger, and growing trust. "Renee." Her name was rough in his throat. He reached for her, then stopped. "I won't push." She closed the distance herself, pressing her palm to his chest. His heart raced under her touch. "I'm choosing this," she whispered. His kiss was careful at first, giving her control. She wound her fingers in his shirt, pulling him closer. They stumbled inside, barely remembering to close the balcony door. In her room, he asked permission for every touch. She set the pace, and he followed, responsive to every signal. When she reached for protection in her nightstand, he waited for her clear yes before continuing. Their coupling was intense but tender, need tempered by care. She discovered the man beneath the monster, the gentle way he cradled her head, how he watched her face for any sign of discomfort, the soft words he murmured in multiple languages. After, they lay tangled in sheets, her head on his chest while he played with her hair. The rosary around his neck caught the dim light. "I could go legitimate," he said into the darkness. "Not all at once, but systematically. Sell off the weapons trades first, then the protection rackets." She traced the silver cross with one finger. "You'd do that?" "I've been considering it since before you. The world's changing. Old ways of power are becoming liability." He caught her hand, pressed it over his heart. "But you make me want it more. A clean life. Something the boys could be proud of." "It would take time." "Yes. Years, probably. But I have legitimate businesses already. Real estate, import-export, technology. I could expand those, transition the rest slowly enough to avoid war." Renee propped herself up to study his face. "This isn't about us. Don't make promises just because we slept together." "It's not a bargaining chip," he said firmly. "It's a plan I've had in motion. You just accelerate the timeline. Give it purpose beyond practicality." She settled back against him, considering, "We need to keep this quiet until after the hearing. Caldwell would twist it to make me look compromised." "Agreed." His arms tightened around her. 72 hours. We focus on building your case, protecting the boys. This stays between us." Renee's fingers found the rosary again, warm from his skin. The silver felt like a promise, a bridge between his past and whatever future they might build. His brother's matching cross had burned in that long-ago fire, but this one survived, like the man who wore it. The city hummed beyond their windows, and somewhere in it, Caldwell planned his next move. But here in this room, they'd found something unexpected. Trust, understanding, and the possibility of redemption. Conrad's phone buzzed on the nightstand, another update from Spire, probably. But for now, they let it wait. Content in this pocket of peace they'd carved out of danger. The clock edged toward midnight. Soon they'd need to separate, maintain appearances for the morning. But for these moments, they allowed themselves to simply be a man and a woman, stripped of labels and histories, finding solace in each other's arms. Morning sun streamed through the penthouse windows as rapid knocking echoed through the suite. Conrad checked the security feed, his jaw tightening at the sight of 2 process servers flanked by a social worker. "Ms. Carter," one called through the door. "We have a court order for an immediate welfare check." Renee's hands shook as she fastened the top button of her navy cardigan, the one Spire had modified with a tiny camera lens. Conrad nodded almost imperceptibly. They'd prepared for this. "My terms first," Conrad stated through the intercom. "You enter unarmed, one at a time. My security team searches you. The children stay in sight of their guardian at all times." The social worker, Ms. Martinez, agreed. Her professional demeanor carried an undercurrent of tension as she entered, clipboard clutched tight. The process servers remained outside. Jamal and Theo sat at the kitchen island finishing breakfast. They'd been coached: act natural, tell the truth, stay calm. Renee kept her voice steady as she introduced them. The boys have a routine here, she explained, leading Ms. Martinez through the suite. Homeschooling materials arrived yesterday. We maintain regular mealtimes, bedtimes, and study periods. The social worker noted everything: the fully stocked kitchen, the boys' organized bedroom, the safety measures. She watched Theo show off his math workbook while Jamal explained their Brave Voices practice game. And Mr. Vale's presence, she asked carefully. Security consultant, Renee answered smoothly. After the shooting at St. Bridget's, we needed protection. Conrad stood back, letting Renee lead. The camera in her button captured it all: the social worker's thorough inspection, the boys' easy interaction with both adults, the complete absence of neglect or coercion. I have to be honest, Ms. Martinez said as she finished. The emergency petition raises serious concerns about exposure to criminal elements. Judge Matthews can be unpredictable with these cases. We understand, Renee replied, though her fingers curled into fists at her sides. After the social worker left, Conrad retreated to his office. Files spread across his desk, bank statements showing Caldwell's suspicious deposits, surveillance photos of Bishop's cartel meetings, timestamps proving the leaked schedule trap. Building a war chest? Renee asked from the doorway. Building your defense, he pushed back from the desk. Every piece legally obtained, admissible in court. She crossed to examine a photo. Caldwell shaking hands with a known cartel enforcer. He really thought he could hide this. Men like him mistake power for invisibility. Conrad's voice held cold certainty. His own body camera footage will bury him. Throughout the afternoon, Renee worked with the twins on their Brave Voices game. They practiced answering questions clearly, explaining why they felt safe, describing their daily routine. Remember, she told them, a judge is just a person who wants to make sure you're okay, like a doctor for families. Theo nodded seriously. And we tell the truth, because lies make bigger problems. That's right, baby. She hugged them both, fighting back tears. As sunset painted the windows orange, Conrad's phone buzzed. Spire had mapped Bishop's movements to a warehouse near the docks. Weekly meetings with cartel contacts, always on Thursdays at midnight. Renee's phone chimed next. Unknown number. I have proof about your sister's death. Meet me in the stairwell 2 floors down. Come alone, for privacy. This helps your case. She showed Conrad the message. His expression hardened. It's a trap. Obviously, she agreed. But we need to know who's setting it. They formulated a quick plan. Renee would go with an escort wearing both the camera and the delicate tracker bracelet Conrad had given her. For emergencies. The silver chain looked like jewelry but carried a powerful GPS signal. I don't like this, he said as she fastened the bracelet. Neither do I. She checked her cardigan button was secure. But we need to know how far they'll go. The twins were absorbed in a movie, safely watched by 2 guards. Renee kissed their heads. Mama's going for a quick walk to stretch her legs, she told them. I'll be right back for bedtime stories. Promise? Jamal asked. Promise. At the penthouse door, Conrad gripped her elbow. The touch was professional, correct for a security consultant, but his fingers trembled slightly. Ready? He asked. She nodded, hyper-aware of the camera recording everything. They stepped into the hallway together, the tracker a cool circle around her wrist, her heart pounding despite the guards flanking them. The elevator stood ready, but they turned toward the stairwell instead. Each step echoed in the concrete shaft. Renee counted floors, breathing steady, mind racing. Was it Caldwell waiting below? Bishop? Some cartel player they hadn't identified yet. The not knowing crawled under her skin, but she kept her face neutral, her pace even. 2 floors down. The heavy metal door loomed ahead. Conrad positioned himself slightly behind her, close enough to react, but far enough to give whoever waited a false sense of security. Renee's hand reached for the door handle. The tracker bracelet caught the fluorescent light, twinkling like a promise of safety, while the camera in her button recorded every moment of this calculated risk. The stairwell door creaked open. Bishop stood there, palms raised in a show of peace. His familiar face twisted into an apologetic grimace. Miss Carter, I have something you need to see about your sister. The fluorescent lights above them flickered, casting strange shadows. Renee felt Conrad tense behind her, his breath steady but alert. A rush of movement. Pain exploded across her temple. The world tilted sideways as someone lunged from the shadows. She glimpsed a metal pipe swinging down. "No!" Conrad's roar filled the stairwell. He shoved her behind him, his body becoming a shield as he tackled her attacker. They crashed against the wall in a tangle of limbs. Metal clanked against concrete. A canister rolled, spewing thick gray smoke. Renee's vision blurred, her head throbbing where she'd been struck. "Mama!" That voice, Theo's voice, cut through her daze like ice water. What were the twins doing here? Through the spreading smoke, she saw them at the landing below. Jamal and Theo, wide-eyed with fear, their guard crumpling as someone struck him from behind. Small hands reached toward her as dark figures grabbed the boys. "Run!" She tried to scream, but her voice came out slurred. Conrad's men swarmed the stairwell, weapons drawn. Two grabbed Renee, pulling her back toward safety while others charged down after the kidnappers. The smoke made everything dreamlike, surreal. "Service elevator!" someone shouted. "They're heading for the side exit." Boots thundered on metal stairs. Shouts echoed. But the kidnappers had too much of a head start. Through security feeds patched to their phones, they watched helplessly as a dark van peeled away from the building. Conrad lifted Renee into his arms, carrying her back to the suite. Her head lolled against his shoulder, consciousness wavering. His heart hammered against her cheek, the only sign of his fear. "Stay with me," he murmured. "Stay awake." Inside, he laid her on the couch while Spire's fingers flew across keyboards. Traffic camera feeds filled the wall screens, tracking the van's path. "East on Madison," Spire reported. "Now south on Harbor Drive. Pattern suggests the docks." Renee forced her eyes open, fighting the dizziness. Her first clear thought was for her camera. With trembling fingers, she activated the continuous upload feature. If they took her too, there would be evidence. "The bracelet," she managed. "Can we track it?" "Already pinging." Conrad's voice was ice. "They didn't find it on Jamal." Thank God for small mercies. She'd slipped the tracker onto Jamal's wrist while kissing him goodbye, a mother's instinct warning her to take precautions. Minutes ticked by like hours as she regained clarity. The blow had been glancing, painful, but not severe. By the time Conrad finished prepping breach gear, she could stand without swaying. "Show me," she said, nodding to the weapons laid out on the kitchen counter. His eyes met hers, measuring. Then he demonstrated how to load the spare magazines, his movements precise. "Thumb pressure here. Listen for the click." She copied him exactly, hands steady despite everything. The familiar medical focus that served her in the ER took over. This was just another kind of emergency procedure. Conrad divided his team efficiently. The main force would sweep the warehouse district grid, where the tracker signal was strongest. A smaller unit would create a diversion at the opposite end of the docks. He and Renee would lead the central breach once they had confirmation of the boys' location. "They'll expect you to come in hot," she said, checking her camera feed one last time. "But they won't expect a mother." "You don't have to." "They're my sons," her voice broke. "I promised my sister, I promised them. Where they go, I go." He touched her face, gentle despite his tactical gear. For a moment, the mask of the ruthless syndicate boss cracked, showing the man beneath, the one who still cried over a lost brother. "Together, then," he said softly. They moved fast after that. Body armor sized for her. Comms checked and double-checked. Medical kit strapped to her thigh beside the loaded magazines. Everything organized with the same methodical care she used to prepare for complex procedures. The city lights blurred past as their two-car convoy wound through empty streets. In the back seat, Renee touched the tender spot on her temple, using the pain to stay focused. Beside her, Conrad radiated controlled violence, his body coiled like a spring. The dashboard clock flicked to 9 p.m. as they approached the waterfront. Cargo containers loomed like metal mountains against the night sky. Somewhere in that maze, her boys were waiting. Somewhere in that darkness, the people who dared to take them were about to learn why you never separate a mother from her children. The tracker signal pulsed stronger. Their headlights swept across weathered warehouse signs. Unit 47, Unit 48, Unit 49. Renee checked her camera one last time, then touched the bracelet she now wore again, its twins safely hidden on Jamal's wrist, leading them straight to their targets. The convoy rolled silent and dark through the shadows of the industrial maze, closing in on their prey. The fish market's shuttered windows leaked yellow, light as Conrad dragged two cartel lookouts inside. Their knees hit concrete with dull thuds, the impact sending small clouds of fishy dust spiraling in the stale air. Salt and rotting scales filled the air, making Renee's already unsettled stomach roll with each shallow breath she took. "Location," Conrad demanded. His voice carried no emotion, just flat certainty that he would get answers. His fingers flexed at his sides, the only hint of the violence waiting beneath his controlled exterior. The overhead lights cast harsh shadows across his face, turning his eyes into bottomless pits. The first man spat, the glob of saliva landing just inches from Conrad's polished shoes. Conrad didn't flinch, didn't rage. He simply pressed a thumb into a precise point on the man's shoulder that made him scream, a high, glass-shattering sound that echoed off the metal fixtures. Renee watched as Conrad applied pressure with surgical precision, his face impassive while the man writhed. "Bay 17, the second lookout blurted, eyes wide with terror. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the chill. "West Side, Steel Office up top." Detective said, "Record it." Conrad switched on his phone, the blue light illuminating the stark fear on both men's faces. Names, dates, every dirty deal. They talked, words tumbling out in a desperate rush. Renee listened from the doorway, counting breaths to stay steady. 4 counts in, 4 counts out. Jamal Marcus Carter, Theodore James Carter. Her sons' names became a mantra, the only thing keeping her upright as the men detailed the corruption that had put her children in danger. Within minutes, the lookouts were zip-tied, wrists bound behind their backs, ankles secured to the metal chairs. Their recorded confessions set to auto-forward to internal affairs. Digital insurance, evidence of corruption that would burn Caldwell's career to ash. Conrad tapped his screen 3 times, confirming the upload had started. Back in the SUV, Renee pressed her forehead against cool glass. The warehouse district blurred past, a maze of metal and shadow, abandoned loading docks, and chain-link fences topped with razor wire. Her temple throbbed where she'd been struck during the abduction. Focus slipped and caught like a bad radio signal, moments of clarity dissolving into static. 4 counts in, Jamal Marcus Carter, 4 counts out. Theodore James Carter. They pulled up behind a row of shipping containers, engines silent, headlights cut. Through gaps between the metal walls, Bay 17 loomed. 3 stories of corrugated steel and dirty windows. A security light cast weird shadows across the loading dock, transforming ordinary machinery into lurking monsters. Movement on the upper catwalk caught Renee's eye. Aaron Caldwell stepped into view, holding what looked like a microphone, his badge glinting on his belt. Even from this distance, she could see his smug smile, the satisfaction of a man who believed he'd finally won. "Nurse Carter!" His amplified voice bounced off metal walls, distorted and hollow. "Come to prove how unfit you are? Bringing armed criminals to a custody dispute?" His laughter crackled through the speakers, sharp as broken glass. Bishop appeared beside him, expression unreadable in the harsh light, hands resting casually on the metal railing. Through the barred window of a steel office behind them, small faces pressed against glass. Jamal, Theo, alive. Renee's heart clenched at the sight of their wide, frightened eyes searching the darkness below. "You want them!" Caldwell's voice crackled, edged with malicious pleasure. "Watch the big bad boss kneel, or I make one call, and these boys disappear south where no American court can touch them." His fingers tapped his phone screen for emphasis. Conrad stepped into the open, movements deliberate as a predator's. His gun held loose at his side, barrel pointed at the ground. The security light caught his face, illuminating the cold focus in his eyes, the same eyes that had looked at her with unexpected tenderness just days before. "Throw it down," Caldwell ordered, his voice echoing. "On your knees." The weapon clattered on cement, the sound sharp against the backdrop of lapping water at the nearby dock. Conrad sank slowly, hands raised, but his eyes flicked upward, a tiny gesture that made Renee's breath catch, the signal they'd planned while speeding through darkened streets. A high-pitched whine cut the air. The drone appeared as a darker patch of night, hovering just beyond the office window, its small red light blinking steadily. The flashbang dropped from its undercarriage, a metallic egg of chaos. Thunder and lightning exploded together. Renee was already moving, darting between crates as chaos erupted above. Shouts and curses rained down as she scaled the rusty emergency ladder. Her boots found purchase on stacked pallets, muscles screaming as she pulled herself higher. The boys' faces appeared at the window again as she whispered urgently through the bars. "Back away, loves. Away from the glass." They disappeared into shadows. Smart boys. Brave boys. Their small feet scrambling across the office floor. Conrad hit the office door like a battering ram, shoulder first. Metal shrieked in protest. He rolled through the gap as Renee reached the window, her fingers gripping the cold steel bars. The twins scrambled toward her voice, their pajamas dirty, faces smudged with tears and grime. "Behind the desk," she hissed. "Now!" They dove for cover, small bodies disappearing behind scarred metal. But in the doorway, Bishop's arm rose in one fluid motion. His pistol found Conrad's spine with deadly precision, barrel pressed against the exact spot that would sever his spinal cord if fired. The warehouse held its breath. Somewhere in the darkness, a chain creaked, metal against metal. Water lapped at the dock pilings outside, a rhythmic counterpoint to Renee's racing heart. And Bishop's finger curved around the trigger, ready to end it all with one small movement. 4 counts in, 4 counts out. Jamal Marcus Carter, Theodore James Carter. Renee's camera recorded everything, the small device clipped to her jacket, uploading proof of this nightmare in real time, sending evidence to servers beyond anyone's reach. Her hands pressed against the window bars, still reaching for her children. The air tasted like metal and fear and the acrid aftermath of the flashbang. Conrad remained perfectly still, but his eyes met hers through the gloom. In that look was everything they hadn't said. Everything they might never get to say. Regret for time wasted. Hope for what might have been. A silent apology for failing her. The boys huddled behind the battered desk, holding each other, Jamal's arm protectively around his younger brother, their matching dark eyes huge with terror, just like their mother's eyes in that creased photograph Renee kept in her wallet, just like Conrad's twin in the foster home fire that still haunted his nightmares. Bishop's gun didn't waver. His face showed nothing, no triumph, no regret. Just the empty calculation of a man who had decided survival meant betrayal. His breathing remained steady, his grip firm, years of practice evident in his stance. Caldwell's footsteps echoed on the catwalk outside, coming to witness his victory. To gloat over the woman who had refused to be his puppet, who had rejected his control and his corruption. His shadow stretched across the threshold, growing larger with each approaching step. 4 counts in, Jamal Marcus Carter. 4 counts out, Theodore James Carter. The warehouse air grew thicker, heavier with each passing heartbeat, like the moment before lightning strikes, like the pause between a flatline and a pulse returning, like the space between breathing in and breathing out when you're afraid it might be your last. Renee's fingers whitened against the window bars. The camera recorded. The boys breathed in terrified unison, and Bishop's finger tightened fraction by fraction on the trigger that would change everything. The scene hung suspended in that eternal instant, the space between one choice and another, between loyalty and betrayal, between love and death. Time stretched impossibly thin, each second an eternity of possibility. 4 counts in, Jamal Marcus Carter. 4 counts out, Theodore James Carter, until Bishop's choice would shatter the moment like glass, sending all their fates spinning toward their final collision. Conrad moved like liquid shadow. One moment Bishop's gun pressed against his spine, the next he twisted, grabbing Bishop's wrist and slamming it against the metal doorframe. The crack of bone mixed with the sharp report of the pistol discharging into the wall. They crashed together in the narrow doorway. Bishop fought with the desperate strength of a cornered animal, landing a knee to Conrad's ribs. But Conrad had survived darker nights than this. His elbow caught Bishop's throat, forcing him back. They grappled, boots scraping on cement, breath harsh in the confined space. Bishop's head snapped back from a precise strike. His grip on the gun loosened. Conrad wrenched it free, pivoted, and fired twice. The shots thundered in the small office. Bishop stumbled backward, red blooming across his chest, eyes wide with disbelief before he crumpled. Above them, Caldwell's panicked shots peppered the catwalk. The detective fled, footsteps clanging on metal stairs. Renee's hands moved with medical precision despite her racing heart. She yanked off her belt, grabbed a ruler from the desk, and improvised a brace across the door lock. The twins huddled beneath the heavy desk, following her silent gestures. "Stay down," she whispered. "Count your breaths like we practiced." She sprinted after Conrad, who was already scaling the stairs 3 at a time in pursuit of Caldwell. Her finger found the body cam's external mic switch. "Detective Aaron Caldwell is attempting to traffic minors," her voice echoed off steel walls. "This is a live recording uploading to secure servers." Caldwell's silhouette appeared and vanished between warehouse support beams. He fired blindly over his shoulder, bullets sparking off railings. Conrad advanced like an avenging shadow, methodically cutting off escape routes. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Red and blue light began to paint the warehouse windows. Caldwell reached the end of the upper walkway, trapped between Conrad's steady approach and a 20-foot drop to the warehouse floor. His gun clicked empty. He threw it aside with a curse. Conrad's weapon rose, a clean shot lined up. One trigger pull would end it. "Don't!" Renee's voice cut through the tension. "An execution ruins everything we can prove." Conrad's jaw clenched, but he adjusted his aim, hurting Caldwell backward with precise shots that sparked near his feet. The detective stumbled, arms windmilling as he lost his balance. He landed hard on the metal grating. Renee was there in seconds, zip ties ready from her scrub's pocket. Her hands were steady as she bound Caldwell's wrists, ignoring his thrashing. "This is all a setup," he screamed. "You can't prove anything." Conrad reached down and plucked Caldwell's dropped phone from where it had skittered across the catwalk. His thumb found the call log, pressed play on the most recent entry. Caldwell's voice filled the space, tinny but clear. "Yeah, delivery confirmed for tonight. Judge Matthews owes me. He'll sign whatever emergency order I need. By the time anyone figures it out, the package will be across the border." The recording played directly into Renee's body cam feed. Caldwell's face twisted as he realized what was happening. Police lights strobed through the high windows now, casting alternating shadows of red and blue across the warehouse floor. Voices called out, boots thundered on pavement outside. Conrad moved with fluid efficiency. He retrieved the twins from the office, gathering them under his coat like precious cargo. Jamal buried his face in Conrad's shoulder while Theo clung to his side. Renee fell into step beside them as they slipped toward a maintenance exit. Behind them, Caldwell's shouts echoed off the walls, a desperate man realizing too late that his house of cards had crumbled. The zip ties creaked as he fought against them, screaming accusations that would only dig his grave deeper for the approaching officers. They ghosted through the side door into the cool night air. The twins trembled but stayed silent, understanding instinctively the need for quiet. Renee's hand found Conrad's free one in the darkness, squeezing once. Her body cam continued recording, documenting every second of their escape. The sounds of police activity faded behind them as they moved through shadow-draped alleys. Jamal's small fingers twisted in Conrad's shirt. Theo's breath came in hiccuping gasps against his ribs. Both boys alive. Both safe. Renee kept count of their footsteps, matching her breathing to the rhythm. The night air tasted like salt from the river and smoke from distant chimneys. Her temple throbbed where she'd been struck earlier, but the pain seemed far away, unimportant compared to the solid reality of her family moving through the darkness beside her. They reached the backup vehicle Conrad had positioned earlier, nondescript, with tinted windows and reinforced doors. The boys crawled into the back seat without prompting, still tucked together like puppies seeking warmth. Conrad's movements remained precise as he secured the vehicle, checking sightlines and potential pursuit routes. But his hand shook slightly when he brushed Theo's hair back from his forehead. When he made sure Jamal's seatbelt was properly fastened, the engine turned over with a quiet purr. Behind them, the warehouse district's sodium lights cast long shadows across empty streets. Somewhere in that maze of metal and concrete, justice was catching up to Aaron Caldwell. His own words would condemn him, recorded and preserved by the very technology he'd tried to use against them. The city blurred past tinted windows as they wound their way back to the penthouse. Jamal and Theo had fallen asleep against each other in the back seat, their small hands still clasped together. The dashboard clock glowed 1:03 a.m. Renee's phone buzzed with a message from Spire. "Upload complete. 2 copies, IA and court clerk, time-stamped and authenticated." Conrad carried Theo while Renee lifted Jamal, both children too exhausted to wake as they were transported up to the safe floor. They tucked the boys into their beds, leaving both nightlights on and the door cracked open. In the living room, Conrad paced, making calls in a low voice while Dawn crept closer. Renee dozed fitfully on the couch, startling awake each time she heard the boys shift or whimper. The sun was barely breaking over the horizon when her phone rang. The family court. Coordinator. The judge had reviewed the overnight evidence and was vacating the emergency petition immediately. A brief hearing was scheduled for later that morning, not to question her fitness, but to formally commend her guardianship. "Detective Caldwell is in custody," the coordinator added. "Internal Affairs picked him up an hour ago. They're opening a full corruption investigation." Renee relayed the news to Conrad, watching his shoulders drop slightly with relief. But he didn't stop moving, didn't rest. Instead, he pulled out his laptop and began making more calls. "Sell it all," he ordered into his phone. "Every offshore account, every shell company, I want clean books by end of day." She watched him systematically dismantle his empire piece by piece. The smuggling operation dissolved. The gray market trading routes closed down. Each decision made with the same surgical precision he'd shown in the warehouse, but this time cutting away parts of himself. Around noon, his attorney arrived. Conrad handed over a thick manila envelope, sealed with wax. "Everything I've done," he said quietly. "Every crime, every deal, every partner. Use it to negotiate terms for legitimacy. I don't care what it costs me." The attorney nodded gravely. "It will take time. There will be consequences." "As long as they're my consequences alone," Conrad replied. "Nothing that touches them?" His eyes flickered to where the boys were napping on the couch. When the attorney left, Renee approached Conrad. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, but his gaze was clear. "You're burning your own throne," she said softly. "Some thrones aren't worth keeping." He ran a hand through his hair. "I've lived in shadows so long I forgot what daylight felt like, but they deserve better. You deserve better." "We need rules," Renee said, "for this new life you're choosing." He nodded. "Name them." "No more secrets. Complete honesty, even when it's ugly." She took a breath. "And if you ever slip back into violence for power instead of protection, if you choose the throne over us, I walk. I take them, and I walk." "Agreed." His voice was rough but certain. "I'd rather build something clean with you than rule something corrupt alone." The day passed in a blur of paperwork and phone calls. By evening, Renee's guardianship was formally secured, and Conrad had signed away millions in assets. The boys woke from their nap, requesting pasta for dinner. They gathered around the penthouse dining table, no takeout containers or borrowed time, just simple spaghetti that Conrad and Renee made together in the kitchen, the boys helping by sprinkling too much cheese on top. They poured grape juice into crystal tumblers because Theo insisted it made him feel fancy. Jamal told jokes from his school joke book, each punchline punctuated by his infectious giggle. Theo built a small fort with his garlic bread, then ate it piece by piece. When Conrad accidentally got sauce on his tie, the boys laughed so hard they nearly fell out of their chairs. It was normal. Wonderfully, impossibly normal. After dinner, they piled onto the massive sectional couch for a movie. The boys picked an animated film about dragons, tucking themselves between the adults with their favorite blanket spread across all four of them. Renee felt the tension of the past days finally beginning to ease. Beside her, Conrad's breathing had grown slow and steady. He'd been awake for nearly 2 days straight, and exhaustion was finally claiming him. The city spread out below their windows, lights twinkling like earthbound stars. But up here, in their safe pocket of space, peace settled like a physical presence. No threats lurked in the shadows. No lies waited to be uncovered. Theo's head drooped against Conrad's chest, small fingers curled in the fabric of his shirt. Jamal was already asleep with his head in Renee's lap, face smooth and untroubled. The movie played on quietly, its colors painting soft patterns across their faces. Renee reached across the back of the couch, finding Conrad's hand. Their fingers intertwined as naturally as breathing. His thumb brushed across her knuckles, a gentle back and forth that spoke of permanence rather than passion. The rosary still hung from Conrad's pocket, its silver links catching the television's glow. But it no longer seemed like a memorial to what he'd lost. Instead, it felt like a bridge between past and future, a reminder that even the deepest wounds could heal with enough love and time. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance, but it held no menace now. The panic room door remained closed, unnecessary. The security feeds showed nothing but quiet hallways and empty elevators. Conrad's eyes drifted shut, his breathing deepening further. The hand holding Renee's stayed gentle but firm, as if even in sleep he needed that connection. She felt her own exhaustion tugging, the events of the past days catching up all at once. The movie's soft soundtrack mixed with the sound of 4 people breathing in sync, creating a lullaby of safety and belonging. Up here, surrounded by the family they'd built from broken pieces and desperate choices, the first honest peace they'd known took root and flourished. The morning sun warmed the brownstone's brick facade as Renee checked her watch. 1 month since they'd left the penthouse, and their new routine felt surprisingly natural. She gathered the twins' backpacks while Conrad poured coffee into travel mugs. "Therapy at 4, she reminded him. "Dr. Martinez wants to discuss their progress." Conrad nodded, his tie perfectly knotted despite the early hour. The transformation from syndicate boss to legitimate businessman showed in pressed suits and polished shoes, but his eyes remained vigilant, scanning exits out of habit. "Security firm's final inspection today," he said. "Background checks cleared for most of the crew, the others..." He shrugged. "Severance packages delivered with clear terms. The boys' names stay buried," Renee finished. She understood the implicit threat behind his generosity. The twins thundered down the stairs, sneakers squeaking on hardwood. Their room upstairs was a masterpiece of midnight blues and silver stars, hand-painted by an artist Conrad trusted. The night sky wrapped around their beds like a protective blanket. "Mr. K," Jamal called, something silver glinting in his small hand. "You dropped this yesterday." Conrad knelt, accepting his twin's rosary with gentle fingers, but Jamal shook his head. "It should stay with us, for safety." Understanding softened Conrad's face. He followed Jamal upstairs to their room, where a simple hook waited above the packed bookshelf. The rosary caught the morning light as he hung it carefully. "For my brother," he explained quietly. "And for you both." At the hospital later that morning, Renee settled into her part-time schedule while Conrad handled business across town. Her colleagues had adjusted to seeing the imposing security detail that still shadowed her movements, though now they wore official uniforms and carried legal permits. Between patients, she checked her phone to find pictures from Conrad, the twins at their new school, looking small but brave in their uniforms, the final licensing paperwork for Vale Security Services, a real estate contract for a commercial property downtown. He was building something clean, brick by careful brick. The man who once commanded an empire from shadows now sat through zoning meetings and HR presentations. Yet his core remained unchanged, protective, methodical, devoted to their strange little family. The counseling sessions marked their weeks like clockwork. Dr. Martinez praised the boys' progress, noting how Jamal's anxiety had eased and Theo's nightmares had grown less frequent. The routine helped: homework after school, dinner together every night, bedtime stories without fail. Their brownstone filled with evidence of healing, crayon drawings covered the refrigerator, Lego cities sprawled across the playroom floor. The panic room remained empty, transformed into a storage space for winter coats and holiday decorations. The roof deck became their evening sanctuary. Conrad had strung lights in gentle arcs, creating a canopy of warm gold against the city sky. They often sat there after the boys were asleep, sharing quiet conversations about the day. Tonight, the air held the first hint of autumn. Renee wrapped her hands around a mug of tea, watching Conrad's profile in the soft light. "I used to think I'd spend my life running," she admitted. "From men with power, from anyone who might try to control us." He turned to face her, expression open and vulnerable in a way few ever saw. Without speaking, he knelt before her chair, reaching into his jacket. Instead of a ring box, he produced a set of keys in a thick folder. "The deed to the brownstone," he explained, laying documents in her lap. "Medical proxies, bank accounts, every ally and asset I still maintain." His voice grew rough with emotion. "To the world, I wear steel, but with you, with our boys, I choose to be gentle hands and honest words." The papers detailed everything: his legitimate holdings, the security firm's contracts, property deeds, and investment portfolios. No shadows remained, no secrets left to uncover. "You're safe here," he continued. "All of you. And I want you to be mine forever, if you choose it. No conditions, no hidden costs, just us, building something real." Renee's fingers traced the keys, cool metal warming against her skin. She thought of the past month. Conrad teaching Theo to tie his shoes, patiently demonstrating the loops again and again, the way he checked homework with reading glasses perched on his nose, somehow both powerful and endearingly normal. How he'd surrendered his empire not as a sacrifice, but as a choice for something better. "Yes," she said, fierce and certain. "All of it. The whole messy, beautiful life we're building." Relief and joy transformed his face. He rose, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. The string lights cast their soft glow over everything. The scattered toys on the deck, the city spread out below, the future stretching clean and bright before them. Later, they found the twins had dozed off during their movie, tangled together on the playroom couch. Conrad lifted Theo, while Renee gathered Jamal, their movements synchronized by now. They carried the boys upstairs, past the rosary that caught moonlight through the window. Its silver links a bridge between past and present. Room by room, they clicked off lights behind them, each darkened space holding memories of the month that had changed everything. No time skipped, no loose ends left to unravel. Just 4 people who had found each other in the storm and chosen to build something lasting in its wake.